The lesson begins. Sarah stood nervously in the middle of the massive alien training hall, her heart pounding in her chest. The walls around her were high and imposing, and the air was thick with tension. Above her, the harsh fluorescent lights flickered, casting an eerie glow over the room. The floor beneath her feet was cold and metallic, sending chills up her spine. This was no ordinary training facility. It was designed to break even the toughest warriors, and Sarah was the newest recruit, a human in an alien world, ready to face whatever came next. She had heard stories about the alien instructors, how ruthless and unforgiving they were. But Sarah wasn't here to back down. She had volunteered for this. She had chosen to fight, to prove herself, to show that humans were just as capable as any alien species. The door at the far end of the room slid open with a sharp hiss, and Sarah's pulse quickened. A figure stepped inside, tall and imposing. He was Karos, one of the most feared instructors in the galaxy. His alien features were hard to decipher, his skin a dull shade of green, his eyes glowing with a faint light. His body was massive, muscled, and radiated power. He was known for breaking his students in the most brutal ways possible. Prepare yourself. Karos's voice echoed in the cold room. It was deep, almost like a growl, and it made Sarah's stomach twist. You've come here to learn, but know this learning is painful. Sarah straightened her back, pushing away the fear crawling up her spine. She had no intention of letting this alien intimidate her. She wasn't going to be another recruit who was broken by his training. Karos stepped forward, his massive frame looming over her. His gaze was cold, calculating, as if sizing her up, determining how long it would take to defeat her. He was about to show her the harsh realities of intergalactic combat. You will fight me, Karos stated, his voice commanding. And if you survive, you will learn what it means to be strong. Sarah nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She could feel her muscles tightening, readying for the challenge ahead. But she wasn't naive. She knew she was outmatched. Karos was faster, stronger, and more experienced. Yet that didn't mean she would go down easily. She would fight with everything she had. Without warning, Karos lunged forward, his movement so fast that Sarah barely had time to react. He slammed into her, knocking the wind out of her lungs as they both hit the cold floor with a thud. Pain shot through Sarah's body, but she gritted her teeth and rolled out from beneath him. Quickly getting back on her feet, Karos was already waiting for her, his eyes flashing with excitement. You're not bad for a human, but you need to learn that strength is more than just willpower. Before Sarah could react, he launched another attack. This time, she was ready. She blocked his first strike, deflecting his massive fist with a quick movement. But his second blow came faster than she anticipated, and it caught her off guard, sending her crashing back to the floor. Her head spun, and for a moment, she thought about giving up. But the thought was quickly pushed away. No, she wasn't going to quit. Not now, not ever. Karos stood over her, looking down with disdain. You are weak, he sneered. And weaklings don't survive here. The words stung, but Sarah didn't let them break her. She had faced worse in her life. There were times when she felt just as weak, back on Earth, but she had survived. She could survive this too. With a fierce determination, Sarah pushed herself up again. Her muscles burned with exhaustion, but she ignored the pain. She couldn't let him see her falter. Not now. Get up, Karos ordered, his voice more forceful this time. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she locked eyes with him. She wasn't just here to learn. She was here to prove that humans could be just as strong as any alien species. She wasn't going to let Karos make her feel small. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Sarah rushed at Karos, aiming a punch at his chest. Karos effortlessly dodged and retaliated with a swift kick to her side, sending her tumbling across the floor, But Sarah didn't stop. She got back up, her vision blurry, her body screaming at her to quit. Instead, she gritted her teeth and launched herself at him again. This time she aimed lower, targeting his legs. Karo seemed surprised as she made contact with his shin, sending him off balance for a split second. Sarah seized the opportunity. She grabbed his arm, twisting it to the side in a desperate attempt to bring him down. But Karos quickly recovered, and with a forceful shove, he sent her sprawling back again. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that," Karos said with a smirk, watching her struggle to rise. "But stubbornness alone won't win a fight." Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps, her body bruised and battered. She knew she couldn't win this fight with sheer strength. But maybe, just maybe, she could use her determination to outlast him. The first lesson had been given, but Sarah wasn't ready to give up yet. She had just started to learn what it really meant to be strong, and she was only beginning to understand the cost of survival in this cruel, unforgiving world. The lesson was far from over, but Sarah was determined to see it through. No matter what it took, the power of rebellion. Sarah's body throbbed with pain as she slowly pulled herself up from the cold floor of the alien training hall. Her breath came in sharp gasps, and her vision was blurry, but she refused to let Karos see her weakness. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to stop, to take a break, but that wasn't an option. She wasn't here to quit. She was here to prove herself. She was here to show the galaxy that humans weren't to be underestimated. Karos stood across from her, watching with amusement. He was clearly unscathed, not even breathing heavily after their brief exchange. The alien instructor was a beast of muscle and experience, and in the grand scheme of things, Sarah knew that she was nothing more than a speck in his path. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was how long she could survive. "Your spirit is admirable human," Karos said, his voice cold and calculating. "But that's all it is, spirit, nothing more." Sarah wiped the blood from her lip, glaring at him. She had been knocked down, but she wasn't out. "Not yet. You can't. Teach me anything by beating me," she shot back, her voice hoarse but defiant. "If you want me to learn, then show me something." Karos tilted his head slightly, intrigued by her challenge. He hadn't expected her to speak back so boldly. For a moment there was silence between them, the weight of his unspoken judgment hanging in the air. Then, with a swift motion, Karos took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not here to teach you how to win, human. I'm here to teach you how to break." His words stung, but they also ignited something in Sarah, a burning desire to prove him wrong. She wasn't going to be broken. She wouldn't let this alien, or anyone else, tear her down. Without warning, Karos launched himself at her again, moving faster than Sarah could track. His fist came down in a blur, aimed directly at her head. She barely dodged in time, feeling the wind from his punch whip past her cheek. He followed up with a knee to her stomach, knocking the air from her lungs. Sarah stumbled back, her legs shaking from the impact. She could barely keep herself upright. Karos's eyes glowed with satisfaction as he watched her struggle. He was testing her, pushing her to her limits, seeing if she would break. But Sarah wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stay on her feet. As Karos moved in again, Sarah took a deep breath and focused. She could feel the anger building in her chest, but this time it wasn't just anger. It was something else. It was defiance. Karos aimed another punch, but this time Sarah was ready. She twisted to the side, avoiding the blow. She grabbed his wrist and yanked it downward, forcing him off balance. With a swift move, she brought her knee up into his side. Karos grunted, surprised by the force of her strike. The alien instructor staggered back, holding his ribs, his eyes narrowing as he stared at her, impressed but not pleased. Not bad. "Human," he said, his voice now tinged with respect. "Learned how to fight, but this is far from over." Sarah didn't respond. She was still catching her breath, but the spark of rebellion inside her had only grown brighter. She had surprised him. She had done more than just survive. She had shown him that humans weren't just weak prey for the taking. They were capable of fighting back. Carlos's eyes glinted as he raised his fists, prepared for the next round. "You think you can defeat me? I am a warrior, human. You are a child in comparison." But Sarah didn't flinch. The pain in her body, the exhaustion in her limbs, it didn't matter. She was done being underestimated. She had come here to survive, to prove her worth. And no matter how hard Carlos tried to break her, she wasn't going to let him dot the next time Carlos attacked. Sarah moved with more confidence. She dodged and countered with precise strikes, each movement calculated. She wasn't just reacting. Anymore, she was in control. She could feel her instincts kicking in, the years of hardship back on Earth, fueling her every move. She was learning more than just the art of combat. She was learning what it meant to fight for survival. For every blow Carlos landed, Sarah retaliated with even more force. She wasn't just trying to beat him. She was fighting to show him that humans weren't just physical beings. They had something else, something stronger. The drive to never give up, no matter the odds. Carlos paused for a moment, surprised by the intensity in her eyes. For a brief second, the confident smirk on his face faltered. He had expected her to falter, to break. But she didn't. Instead, Sarah took a deep breath, her chest heaving. She was hurt. She could feel the bruises already forming, but she was still standing. Her heart raced with determination. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "And I'm not going to let you break me." Carlos regarded her silently, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he seemed to reconsider. The human was more than just a specimen. She was something else. She was defiance made flesh. "You're stubborn," he said finally, his tone begrudgingly respectful. "I'll give you that?" Sarah didn't answer. She just stared at him, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than ever. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. And Carlos knew it. A dangerous turn. The air in the training hall grew thick with the tension between Sarah and Carlos. The room, once a place of calm discipline, now seemed like an arena, every movement, every breath, laden with purpose. Sarah had been pushed to her limits, but she wasn't ready to stop. Not yet. Carlos watched her closely, his eyes narrowing. As he sized her up, the alien instructor's usual confidence had cracked just slightly. For a brief moment, Sarah had surprised him, and that wasn't something he took lightly. He was used to breaking his students, making them submit to the brutal realities of their training. But Sarah wasn't like the others. She fought back not just physically, but with a fire in her spirit that he hadn't seen in many species before. "You think this is enough to stop me?" Carlos's voice was deep and filled with barely contained frustration. He stepped closer, his movements calculated, the threat hanging in the air like a storm about to break. "You are still far from mastering the fight, human. This is where your training truly begins." Sarah's heart beat faster as she steadied herself. She could feel the burn of exhaustion in her muscles, the ache in her side where Carlos's earlier blows had landed. She was far from finished, though. She wasn't going to let this alien break her. She couldn't, not when she had come this far. Carlos lunged again, faster than before. This time, he wasn't holding back. His speed was incredible, faster than anything Sarah had ever faced before. His fist came at her like a blur, but this time she was ready. She dodged to the side, but as she did, Carlos pivoted, catching her off guard with a knee to the chest that knocked the breath out of her. Sarah stumbled backward, the force of the blow sending her crashing against the cold metal wall. Pain shot through her ribs, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to let him see her weakness. Karos moved in again, this time with a crushing speed that left no room for hesitation. He grabbed her by the arm, twisting it behind her back. Sarah gasped as the pressure built, but even in the pain, she knew she had to act fast. With a quick, instinctual movement, she drove her elbow into his stomach. The force was enough to make Karos stagger back. Sarah twisted her body out of his grasp, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. She wasn't going to give in. Not now. "You're stronger than I thought," Karos said, his voice a low growl. There was something in his tone, now an acknowledgement of her resilience. But there was also an edge to it, a warning that he would take this fight further than before. But strength alone won't win this fight. You have to break first. His words were like a challenge, and that was something Sarah couldn't ignore. She had always hated the idea of being broken. It was something that had followed her for years, being told she wasn't strong enough, that she didn't belong. But here, in this moment, with Karos's arm still trembling from her strike, she realized something. Breaking wasn't an option anymore. Karos charged at her again, but this time, Sarah saw something different in his approach. He wasn't just attacking physically, he was trying to break her mentally, get inside her head. She could feel the tension in the air, the pressure, mounting as he pushed forward. Sarah's breath came in quick, shallow gasps, but she didn't let it control her. She focused on his movements, his body language. He was fast, but there was a rhythm to his strikes. She just had to find it. With one final daring move, she dodged his strike, spinning out of the way. She grabbed his arm mid-swing, using his momentum against him. With a forceful twist, she sent Karos tumbling to the floor. For a moment, everything was still. Karos lay on the floor, stunned by the sudden turn of events. Sarah stood over him, her breathing ragged, her body shaking from the effort. But there was a fire in her eyes now. She had done it. She had taken him down. Karos slowly got to his feet, a strange look in his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was impressed. "You've learned to fight, human," he said quietly, his voice filled with a grudging respect. "But this isn't just about physical strength. This is about survival." Sarah narrowed her eyes, not letting her guard down. "I'm still standing," she replied, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "That's what matters." Karos studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something deep in his mind. "You may have won this round, but there is far more to this than you realize. The fight is just beginning." Sarah clenched her fists. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Karos stepped back, finally giving her the space she needed. He looked at her once more, this time with a knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Let's see how long your defiance lasts when you face the real challenge." As Sarah stood there, catching her breath, she knew that Karos was right about one thing. The real challenge was still ahead. The fight wasn't just about learning to land a blow. It was about learning to survive. And she was ready to face whatever came next. The room seemed to grow colder as Karos disappeared into the shadows, leaving Sarah alone in the center of the training hall. Her body ached, her mind raced, but she was more determined than ever. She had survived his lesson. She had made her mark. And now she was ready for the next step. The breaking point, the training hall, was eerily quiet. The sounds of battle replaced by the heavy breathing of both Sarah and Karos. Sarah stood in the center of the room, her body aching from the brutal combat. Her hands were scraped, her legs were sore, and every muscle in her body screamed for rest. But there was no time for that. The lesson had not ended. It had only just begun. Karos stood across from her, his eyes glowing with a cold intensity. He was no longer underestimating her, and he could see the fire in her eyes. Sarah had proven herself to be a fighter, but now Karos was determined to test her in ways she never imagined. This wasn't just a fight for victory anymore. It was a fight for survival. "You've done well to survive this far," Karos sighed, his voice low and dangerous. "But survival isn't enough. You're going to need more than strength to defeat me." Sarah wiped the sweat from her brow, not answering him. She was exhausted, but she wasn't about to show weakness. Not in front of him. She was determined to finish what she had started. Karos took a step forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over her. "You've broken my arm once," he said with a smirk, "but I'm not finished yet. The real test is still ahead. If you can't break me, I will break you." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She knew this was the moment when Karos would push her beyond her limits. But she wasn't about to let him break her. She had survived worse than this. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. Karos charged again, this time with a speed that was almost impossible to track. His movements were like lightning, his massive fist aimed straight at her head. Sarah barely had time to dodge, but she managed to sidestep just in time. The air rushed past her ear as his fist missed by inches. Before she could react, Karos was upon her again, grabbing her by the wrist and pulling her toward him with a strength she couldn't escape. He slammed her into the floor with bone-crushing force. Pain shot up her spine, but Sarah didn't cry out. She refused to. Karos loomed over her, his face twisted into a sadistic grin. "You can't run from me forever. You can't hide behind your willpower. In the end, I will break you." Sarah gasped for air, feeling the weight of his words press down on her. He was right. She couldn't keep dodging forever. But there was one thing he didn't understand. She had nothing left to lose. With every ounce of energy she had left, Sarah shoved herself upward, throwing her shoulder into Karos's chest. He stumbled back, surprised by her sudden force. Sarah didn't waste a second. She grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, using his own momentum against him. For the first time, she saw a flicker of doubt in Karos's eyes. "You think you can defeat me with strength alone?" Karos spat, pushing back against her with all his might. "You will never defeat me. Never." But Sarah was already moving. She used his words against him, slipping out of his grasp, twisting her body around him. Her hands found purchase on his legs, and with one swift motion, she brought him down to the floor. The room echoed with the sound of Karos's body hitting the metal surface. For a moment, he lay stunned, disoriented. Sarah stood over him, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had never been this close to victory before, and for a brief second, the thought of giving up flickered through her mind. But she refused. She had come too far to let him win now. Karos groaned as he slowly pushed himself to his feet, glaring at her with a newfound respect. "You're stronger than I thought, but you still don't understand what it takes to break me." Before Sarah could react, Karos lashed out, this time grabbing her by the throat with one hand, lifting her off the ground. His grip was like iron, and for a moment, Sarah's vision blurred as the pressure on her neck tightened. "Feel the weight of your failure, human," Karos growled. "This is your breaking point. You can't fight what you don't understand." Sarah's heart raced as she struggled to break free from his hold. The room seemed to close in on her as she gasped for air, her body beginning to lose its strength. But even in the face of suffocating pressure, she refused to give in. This wasn't the end. Not yet. With a desperate roar, Sarah focused every ounce of her remaining strength into one final move. She twisted her body in a way she never thought possible, slipping out of Karos's grasp and using her legs to kick him hard in the chest. Karos staggered back, surprised by the ferocity of her resistance. He had underestimated her. But now, he was beginning to understand the depth of her defiance. "I won't break," Sarah gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Not today." Karo stood there for a moment, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, a grim smile spread across his features. "You've passed the first test, human, but you haven't won yet. The real challenge is still to come." As Sarah stumbled backward, her vision blurry from the lack of oxygen and the pain coursing through her body, she knew one thing for sure: Karos hadn't broken her. She was still standing, still fighting, still proving that no matter the odds, humanity could endure, and that, more than anything, would be her ultimate weapon. The battle had only just begun. The consequences of victory, the harsh metallic walls of the training hall, seemed to close in around Sarah as she staggered to her feet. Her body ached from the brutal confrontation with Karos, every bruise and cut a reminder of how far she had been pushed. She was battered, exhausted, but she was still standing. For now, that was enough. Karos had backed off, giving her the space she needed to catch her breath, but Sarah knew better than to relax. This wasn't over. Karos's words echoed in her mind. The real challenge is still to come. He was right. Despite everything, she had only survived the first test. She had proven her strength, her will to fight, but there was a price to pay. The challenges ahead would be even harder, more dangerous. But Sarah was determined to face them, whatever they might be. She wouldn't let Karos or anyone break her. Karos stood across from her, his alien eyes narrowing as he regarded her. His arm, though still wounded, was healing rapidly. It was clear that he had underestimated her, but Sarah wasn't sure if that made him angry or impressed. Either way, it didn't matter. She had earned his respect, but respect in this world meant very little when you are fighting for your life. "You've shown strength," Karos said, his voice low and measured. "But strength alone is not enough. You may have broken my arm, but breaking a bone doesn't break a warrior's will. To truly succeed here, you must master more than just your body. You must master your mind." Sarah clenched her fists, the blood in her veins surging with both anger and determination. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping into her limbs. "What's next?" Karos's lips curled into a faint, almost pitying smile. "You'll wish you hadn't asked." The words hung in the air like a dark promise, and for the first time, Sarah felt a real sense of unease. But there was no turning back now. She had come this far. She couldn't let herself back down. "Follow me," Karos commanded, and without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward the far end of the hall, his heavy footsteps echoing off the metal floors. Sarah followed, each step making her feel more like a prey being led to its doom. She had no idea what Karos had planned for her next, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. They reached a door at the end of the hall, one Sarah hadn't noticed before. It slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. The air inside was thick with the scent of something unfamiliar, something heavy, oppressive. Sarah's pulse quickened as she stepped inside. The room was enormous, the walls lined with strange alien technology she couldn't begin to understand. But what caught her attention wasn't the equipment or the design of the room. It was the creatures standing in the center of the space. They were huge, easily 3 times the size of an average human, and covered in thick, scaly skin. Their eyes glowed a menacing red, and their mouths were lined with jagged teeth. They were alien beasts, each one more terrifying than the last, and they were all staring at her. "This is your next challenge," Karos said, his voice filled with cold amusement. "These are the Koloth, one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. If you can survive them, you might just have a chance of making it through my training." The Koloth let out a low, rumbling growl, and Sarah instinctively took a step back. She could feel the primal fear rising in her chest, but she pushed it down, focusing instead on the task ahead. She had already faced Karos. If she could survive him, she could survive these creatures too. Your challenge is simple, Karos continued. Defeat one of them. If you manage that, I will consider you worthy of continuing the training. If not, well, you won't be leaving this room. Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had no choice but to face these beasts. There was no escape. Karos was watching her closely, as if waiting to see if she would back down. Taking a deep breath, Sarah moved toward the nearest Koloth, trying to ignore the pounding of her heart. The creature snarled and lunged at her, its claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. She ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the swipe of its claws. Her reflexes were fast, but the Koloth was faster, its movements fluid and terrifying. She darted to the side, using the creature's momentum against it. She kicked its leg out from under it, sending the massive beast crashing to the floor. For a moment, she thought she might actually have the upper hand. But the Koloth wasn't down for long. It roared in fury, its eyes burning with rage as it scrambled to its feet, charging again. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared for the next strike. She was running out of options, and the Koloth was relentless. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. If she failed, she would be just another human casualty in Karos's cruel game. But if she succeeded, she tightened her grip, gathering all the strength she had left. This time, she would have to outthink the Koloth. She couldn't rely on strength alone. This was about strategy. She darted to the left, baiting the creature into charging at her again. As it lunged, Sarah dove beneath its body, twisting around, its massive bulk to land behind it. With a swift motion, she struck, aiming for the beast's vulnerable spot. Her hand found purchase in its thick hide, and with every ounce of strength left in her, she twisted. The Koloth let out a high-pitched scream, crashing to the floor, defeated. Panting heavily, Sarah stood over the creature, her chest heaving. She had done it. She had defeated one of them. Karos stood at the edge of the room, watching in silence. He said nothing for a long moment, and Sarah felt a sense of dread creeping over her again. Had it been enough? Was it truly over? Finally, Karos spoke. Impressive human. I didn't think you had it in you. Sarah's breath was still ragged, her body trembling with exhaustion, but she didn't let Karos see it. She had survived. She had won. Karos stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You've proven your strength, but the real test is still ahead. You've made it this far. Now, let's see if you can survive the next challenge. Sarah didn't answer. She was too tired to speak, too overwhelmed by the brutal ordeal. But inside, she knew one thing for sure. No matter what came next, she wasn't backing down. She would face whatever Karos threw at her, and she would survive. Into the arena Sarah's body felt as though it might collapse under its own weight. Her muscles burned from the battle with the Koloth, and the exhaustion of the previous challenges was starting to catch up with her. Her heart was pounding, and her breath came in sharp gasps. But there was no time for rest. Karos, ever the commanding instructor, was already moving forward, his eyes cold and calculating. You've earned a brief respite, Karos said, his voice devoid of emotion. But the real test begins now. Sarah's stomach twisted in anticipation. She had survived his brutal training so far, but this next phase, whatever it was sure to be more than anything she had faced before. The Koloth had been bad enough, but Karos had made it clear. This was just the beginning. Every challenge she faced was pushing her further into the unknown, forcing her to test the limits of her endurance. Karos led Sarah out of the cold training hall, down a long, narrow corridor lined with strange alien technology. The air smelled sterile, and the walls were smooth and metallic. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she followed Karos. She had no idea where they were headed, but the look on Karos's face told her it wouldn't be good. They came to a large, reinforced door, and Karos stopped in front of it. He glanced over his shoulder at her, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to the arena." The door slid open with a mechanical hiss, and Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. The arena was massive, far larger than she had imagined. It was a giant, open space, the floor covered with a strange, dark material that seemed to absorb the light. The walls rose up on all sides, and at the center of the arena, a thick glass barrier separated Sarah from a sprawling, chaotic environment. The entire arena looked like a battleground from a nightmare. She felt a shiver of unease crawl down her spine. There was no way out, no way to escape. Once she stepped into the arena, she would be trapped. It would be her against whatever horrors Karos had designed for her. Karos's voice broke through her thoughts. The Koloth were just a warm-up. In this arena, you will face creatures far worse than anything you've seen. They are the true test of your survival. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to suppress the fear rising in her chest. She had fought against the Koloth, had faced overwhelming odds before, but this felt different. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew she had no choice. She had to face it. She had to survive. Karos gave her a final look, one that seemed to hold a mixture of respect and challenge. "Only the strong survive here, human. You may have defeated a Koloth, but you are not invincible. I suggest you remember that." Before Sarah could respond, the door behind her slammed shut, locking her inside. She spun around, her heart racing, only to find herself face to face with a group of creatures emerging from the darkness of the arena. They were unlike anything Sarah had seen before. Towering, insectoid beings with multiple limbs and glowing red eyes. Their exoskeletons were covered in thick, jagged armor, and they clicked their mandibles together as if preparing to strike. Their size alone was enough to intimidate her, but it was the sheer number of them that truly made her stomach drop. Sarah's pulse quickened as they advanced toward her, their movements deliberate and predatory. She could hear the sound of their legs scraping across the arena floor, each step sending a ripple of fear through her. They were fast and deadly. Without thinking, Sarah sprinted forward, adrenaline surging through her as she reached for the weapon at her side. Her hands closed around the cool metal of a makeshift energy blade, her only hope of surviving what was about to come. The first creature lunged at her, its mandibles snapping shut with an audible hiss. Sarah barely dodged in time, rolling to the side and narrowly avoiding its strike. She spun around, her blade flashing through the air as she slashed at the creature's vulnerable underbelly. It let out a screech, but the wound barely slowed it down. "Come on," Sarah muttered through clenched teeth, trying to steady her breath. She had to keep moving. She couldn't let them corner her. She wouldn't. Another creature charged at her from the left, its claws raised. Sarah swerved just in time, slashing at its limbs, but it barely flinched. She could feel the pressure building with every passing second. There were too many of them. She couldn't keep this up for long. In the distance, she spotted a narrow opening in the arena wall, an escape route. It was her only chance. But to reach it, she would have to fight through the horde of creatures surrounding her. "Focus," she whispered to herself, gathering all the energy she had left. She lunged forward, her blade cutting through the air as she aimed for the nearest creature. It hissed in pain but didn't retreat. Her strike had barely phased it. The creatures closed in, their chittering growing louder. Sarah could feel the panic rising in her chest, but she didn't let it consume her. She had to stay calm, She had to survive. With a sudden burst of determination, Sarah swung her blade in a wide arc, catching one of the creatures in its side. It recoiled, and she seized the opportunity to drive her blade deeper, piercing its exoskeleton. The creature let out a high-pitched scream before collapsing at her feet. One down, but there were still more. She turned to face the others, breathing heavily, her body aching from the constant combat. She was wearing down, but she wasn't going to stop. She couldn't, not when her survival depended on it. As Sarah took her stance, preparing for the next attack, Karos's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "You're doing better than I expected, human, but this is just the beginning." The creatures closed in once again, their eyes glowing with hunger. Sarah raised her blade, ready for the fight, her mind focused on the one thing that mattered, surviving. This was her moment. This was the test that would define her. If she survived, she would prove that nothing, not Karos, not these creatures, not even the universe itself could break her. And Sarah wasn't about to let them win. The battle had only just begun. Proving her worth, Sarah's chest heaved. As she stood in the middle of the arena, surrounded by the bodies of the fallen creatures, her energy was drained, her muscles sore, and the taste of blood lingered on her tongue. She had fought through relentless waves of the alien beasts, those savage, multi-limbed creatures that had come at her with everything they had. And yet, she had survived. Not only that, but she had defeated them. The last of the creatures lay motionless at her feet, its body twitching only slightly as it took its final breath. Sarah stepped back, her hands trembling from exhaustion, but she couldn't let herself show weakness. She had survived this far, and she wasn't going to break now. The arena was quiet now, the silence almost deafening after the chaos of the battle. The only sounds were her ragged breathing and the occasional echo of her footsteps as she moved toward the center of the arena. The thick glass walls that separated her from the observation deck were still in place, and Karos, along with several other alien onlookers, stood in the shadows above her, watching silently. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, but she didn't look up. She couldn't afford to. She had done what they thought impossible, what Karos had never expected. She had proven herself worthy. But she wasn't done yet. The real challenge, the real test, was still ahead. A loud mechanical hiss echoed through the arena as the door behind her slid open. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had been hoping for this moment. She had survived Karos's brutal training, and now she was ready for whatever he had planned. Next, from the shadows emerged Karos, his imposing figure filling the doorway. He walked toward her with slow, deliberate steps, his eyes never leaving her as he approached. His massive frame was covered in scars, evidence of countless battles fought and survived. But now, his eyes held something new respect. "You've done it," Karos said, his voice low and tinged with something Sarah had never heard before admiration. "You've survived the arena. You've proven yourself in ways that many never could." Sarah stood tall, her posture straight and defiant, despite the exhaustion that weighed on her. "I didn't come here to be a failure," she replied, her voice steady. "I came to show that humanity can stand alongside any species in the galaxy." Karos nodded, a rare smile flickering across his face. "You've done more than that, human. You've proven that you have something others don't. You have the will to survive, to fight when it seems impossible." The alien instructor stopped, a few feet away from her, his eyes narrowing as he considered her words. For a moment, Sarah thought he might say something else, something more, but instead, he simply nodded again, his expression unreadable. "Your test is complete," Karos said, his tone now colder, more professional. "You have earned your place here." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a deeper sense of uncertainty. She had passed Karos's brutal trials, but what came next? What did it all mean? She had fought for respect, for survival. But what was the cost of all of it? Was this just the beginning of a greater conflict? The thought lingered in her mind as Karaos turned to face the group of onlookers, signaling that the test was officially over. "We've seen enough," Karaos continued, addressing the others. "This human has proven her strength, her will, her ability to survive against all odds. She has earned the right to join us." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Sarah felt the weight of them. Join us? It was a strange thought. She had entered this place as a student, as someone to be tested, broken, and shaped into something else. But now it seemed that she had crossed a threshold, one that she hadn't anticipated. What happens now? Sarah asked, her voice quiet but firm. Karaos turned back to face her, his expression unreadable. "You are no longer just a recruit, Sarah. You are a warrior, a part of something greater than yourself. The challenges you face from here on out will be unlike anything you've ever encountered. But you've proven yourself worthy of our respect." For a moment, Sarah felt a flash of uncertainty. She had fought for her place here, but what did it mean? She had faced the worst the universe had thrown at her, but now she was about to be thrust into something far more complex, into a world where survival meant more than just physical strength. It meant understanding the forces at play, the politics, the alliances, and the enemies. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. Karaos took one more step toward her, his voice low. "You've proven yourself as more than just a soldier. You've earned the right to fight for what matters." Sarah met his gaze, her heart racing with determination. "GH,